Great. Well, thanks, Sophia, for joining me today. To kick us off, can you introduce yourself briefly for a minute about who you are and what you're working on?
Sure. I'm Sophia Parvizi-Wayne, the founder and CEO of Kanjo Health. If you probably saw what we were doing a year ago, it was slightly different than what we're doing today. We originally started actually as a gaming platform that looked at digital biomarker-based assessments for children's mental health. We've actually realized that the system between clinicians and parents is really broken. So what we actually do now is we are an AI-driven platform for parents and clinicians. So actually by understanding parents and kids better through pre-clinically validated assessments, some additions of digital biomarkers and neuromarkers, we actually can directly refer parents to the help they need and actually provide clinicians all the preclinical insights on that child so they can actually do a better source of diagnostics, remote monitoring, and kind of down the line treatment.
Cool. And when did this pivot happen? I saw on LinkedIn you were sharing like a new vision for this. Is this a couple of weeks ago or is this, yeah?
It's been a few months. I think, look, your first year of building a company is to understand the market better, actually understand the needs and like fail. And I think for us, it's like we saw there was need in what we were building, but we hadn't exactly figured out what that little, like where the little wedge that we could occupy really was. And there are real problems in kind of misdiagnosis, in kind of triaging resources, like on the clinician side. And I was like, well, we've learned so much over the last year. We have the right team to build it. Why don't we go ahead and actually do it now?
Yeah, cool. Great, great overview. And then you were in, I think, the 16th cohort, the London cohort of EF, and that took place in 2021. Is that correct?
Yep. End of COVID.
Cool. Nice. And why did you want to participate in Entrepreneur First?
Honestly, originally I didn't. I did not know what EF was. I was living in the US, where obviously everyone just hears about YC.
Yep.
And I had just left my first startup, which I built while I was at Duke. So when I was at college. And I was like, what do I do next? And I just moved back to London and I was speaking to a guy who'd recently, raised a significant amount of money, was doing really well. And he was like, you seem like the perfect fit for EF.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is EF? And then suddenly I suddenly looked at it and I was like, oh, this is exactly what I need. I don't know exactly what I want to build, but I know what space I can build it in.
Yeah.
And I don't have someone to build it with, but I know I am the right person to build a company right now. And I think that was what really excited me, was that I didn't have to, go and do this application where I'd been like, I've already raised X amount and this is my traction. And yes, I already have FDA approval and my co-founder is a genius. I was like, I'm getting guided on actually how to do those things, which I didn't do the first time, right? So it's like, I can actually do this in a slightly more methodical way than me in college being like, who am I going to go for? And like, oh my God, what do I do with this money?
Yeah. So it seems like the idea maze and trying to find a co-founder was like the biggest draw to you. Do you know if there's like any other options out there that you think is like you've maybe seen from the outside that also focuses on that? Or was EF really like the only option that you think could serve your needs then?
I'm always going to say EF is the best because they did it first. And I truly do believe that. I think they have like a secret sauce that no one else has. There are other organizations that do it, but they're slightly more specific to a domain. So Zinc is another amazing accelerator. Who I do know very well, but they're very specific on like this cohort's going to be climate change. This cohort's going to be mental health. And I think that's equally as beneficial in the way that you're learning with people about a similar topic and bouncing ideas. For me, it really worked actually not having that. So I was surrounded by brilliant, like-minded peers, but we were actually occupying different spaces, which meant it inherently felt more collaborative than competitive. Like we weren't fighting for investment or stealing each other's ideas. I don't know how those work, but for me, that was really helpful. And then the other one I know is Antler, which I know a lot of people know. I don't know as much about it. I think the program's slightly longer than EF. EF is very much like a sprint.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about the process, like getting in? So you met this person who told you about EF. Did you then go to the website and apply online and then interview with the team, or how did that actually happen for you?
Yeah. So I applied on the day and the deadline was that day. And I think it was like 3 questions, and genuinely, it's kind of based on 2 things. It's like founder ability and founder behavior. So it's, are you the right person to build in a certain space? Like, do you have you don't need qualifications, but do you have, proof in your past that you're someone who can build or someone who can sell, right? And, for me, it wasn't my last company that probably got me in. It was the fact that I'm always someone who like goes after what I want, and I will keep going, and I'm happy to fail and do it again. And I was an athlete, you know, all these little things that actually make me the founder I am today. And then the other one is like founder behavior. So there were questions on that. I think it was like 3 questions of like 150 words or something like that. I could be wrong. So I did that. And then the morning after, I was like, guess I'm going to wait a few weeks to hear. Heard back that morning. And they were like, okay, you're into the interview process. And then I had 3 interviews the following day. And I was like, wow, this is moving really quickly. And then the day later, Johnny, who is kind of like the main guy in London, who's great, Johnny Clifford was like, we need to do one more call with you. Did the call with him, and then the day later I was in.
Cool. So it sounds like 4 live calls. Were those all like one-on-one calls? And who were the people on those calls? Was it like their team? Was it past founders in some of these cohorts? Or who are you talking with?
So I only spoke with their team at the time. So it was different members of the team and people who had like do different things within that team, right? So some were those who work more on like the actual team building, some who had like different experience, had fundraised before, et cetera, et cetera. I think they have slightly changed it now that they kind of do like more in person. So seeing how you interact with other founders before, but obviously it was COVID, so we had a slightly different situation. Yeah.
And do you remember any of the questions they asked you during those interviews? Did anything maybe catch you off guard, or did anything maybe just stand out?
I think I ended up being slightly more vulnerable than I expected, but that is also the nature of who I am. I prefer to speak to the person I am rather than the things that I've done. And I think they let me do that. And I think that's quite important. So, you know, it was a lot about like, what is my vision of the world? You know, what kind of spaces do I want to build in? How do I work with other people? What does good leadership actually look like? And, you know, examples of when I've been a good leader, but also when I've made mistakes and not. I'm trying to think what else they asked. I mean, there were a ton of questions, but a lot of the answers I gave were not what I expected to give, you know. It's like, what's one of the times that you were like able to like sell something that, you know, like didn't exist? And I spoke about this like learning to fail class at Duke. All the time I got this like magazine to host my birthday party for me when I was 18 and I was a no one, right? But all these little things actually show that I have this weird skill set that I didn't actually realize I had until I realized I did it every day.
Yeah. Cool. And then I also saw on their website, maybe this was like slightly different for your cohort, but kind of curious. They said about like 80% of their cohort is technical and 20% is non-technical. Did that match up with your experience for your cohort?
We had a slightly more balanced cohort.
Balanced. Okay.
Yeah. We definitely had, I think also technical is quite an interesting term, right? Because you can be technical without being a builder. Yeah. And I think that was something I didn't really know. I was like, oh God, technical can actually mean I have a computer vision PhD. Yeah. But you actually still need a CTO, right? So you're a technical CEO.
Yeah.
So I think that was like one thing I didn't really understand was like, I assumed that technical meant full stack. Whereas actually it means you have this array of people with different kind of domain expertise in very technical spaces. But like someone who has depth in like, you know, AI might not actually be the best person to lead, you know, a tech team.
Yeah. And then I'm also curious about, like, it seems like when you were applying for the cohort, you had a general idea of like the spaces you were interested in. Do you think like people can be like too early to apply to EF, or is like, were people coming in earlier than you even, where maybe they didn't even know what spaces they want to work in yet?
A lot of people didn't know, but I think you can't be too early to start a company.
Yeah.
But I think you have to be in a space, and maybe this is just my personal view, that like you need to have like a strong belief in the world that you want to build. And I think you also, it's like kind of the idea, EF always says strong beliefs, but loosely held. And I think that is like the key thing, right? It's like, I know at some point I'm going to be the right person to build this. So you have this like weird self-confidence and you're like, where does it come from? But, you know, when it comes to customer validation or hearing other things, your ability to go, actually, potentially I need to change it a bit and actually respond to feedback is like critical. And I think going into anything when you're building, you have to be able to respond to feedback, you know, become better, actually go, actually, maybe what I'm building right now isn't what the market needs. What can I do to change that?
Yeah, makes sense. And then EF's program is structured in 2 main stages, what they call form, which is like the co-founder and idea formation phase. And then the other part is what they call launch, which is what they describe as like accelerate and grow your company. I imagine that's like the fundraising stage. Can you talk about, let's maybe start out with the first part of the program. Can you talk about like what actually happens during that first phase where you're trying to find a co-founder, where you're trying to get through the idea maze? Like, how is that structured? What are you doing on sort of like a weekly basis?
Yeah. So at the beginning, EF always says like celebrate breakups. And in your head, you work on an idea with someone for a month and you're suddenly like, well, this isn't working. And you feel like it's actually a breakup. It felt like a breakup when I did it. And then realized actually every time I broke up with someone, I was getting closer to the right person for me to build with. So a lot of that is kind of trial and error. So it's meeting a ton of people, being like, are we going to work for a few days? Let's see what we can, how quickly are we actually moving, right? Like, do our experiences actually match up, right? Because ultimately when you're building a company, it's either like an IP player or an execution player. It's like, who gets there first? Or like, are we building something special? And if those don't work, or, the relationship actually isn't functional, then cut your losses there, move on.
Yeah.
And I think that was really important for me. So, I went through 3 co-founders before I met Stefan, and like I knew Stefan the whole time. These people are my friends and my peers.
Yeah.
Me and Stefan were already friends. And then the week before Form ended, me and Stefan were like, why haven't we tried this before?
Yeah. And then just want to hear more about, I guess, like what you were doing though. Like, was this just like you were doing a bunch of one-on-ones with people in the cohort, and that's how you like found like, hey, me and this person connected, we should start working on something, and then ended up like maybe that not working out, and then you moving on to try to find another person? Did they have like events around like maybe specific topics that you would attend and then speak with people, or what? Yeah.
I mean, you're building as well as networking, right? So like if you meet someone, you're going to act as if you're building a company together. Right. So this whole time you're also doing, we're having like these amazing people come in to teach us actually, about like what does good customer testing look like? Like the guy who wrote the mum test came in and gave us a talk. So you're still, getting those building blocks of like, how do I actually build a company and how do I move quickly? What does a good pitch deck look like? So we're still learning all these things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, sometimes you'd be learning these things with a totally different co-founder. So a lot of the people that, did raise money on my cohort had the same co-founder the whole way through.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people did. And by the time, they got to launch, they were kind of already with a product.
Yeah.
So by the time I got to launch, I had my demo ready with Stefan. We built it in a week. We had people using it, which is crazy. I don't really know how that works. But yeah, I think it's not just about the relationship building. It's also like, can you build?
Yeah. And it seems like EF really focuses on evaluating individuals and taking individuals. Did people in your cohort join as co-founders? Like, was there anyone already like pre-formed teams, or everyone was on their own looking for a co-founder?
You can't really go in as a company.
Okay.
Like you don't.
Yeah. And then it seems like, I mean, you were able to find your co-founder through the program. Just looking at their website, it seems like they've been able to match a bunch of people. Like, why do you think EF is successful in helping people find co-founders? Is there any insights that I guess that you picked up from the process?
I think their ability to do talent investing is really high. I think they are very good at spotting talent and knowing what founder compatibility looks like, and actually like pushing you on it. Like you would think that they would actually just go, oh my God, you got your person, go, 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 go. But actually, half the time they're encouraging me to break up with people. They were like, this isn't going to serve you. This isn't going to work well. We know your personality. We know what you want to build. This isn't going to work.
Yeah.
So the whole time, like, yes, they're a fund, but they're also being like, is this going to be something that you can do in 3 years, and question you on it?
Yeah.
Me and Steph had therapy together during EF. We literally had like marriage therapy because I was unable to give him like feedback.
Yeah.
I like couldn't tell him when I was upset or when I felt like he had done something wrong. And then, once a week, me and Stefan had to go and meet Gina Gorlin, who's this amazing kind of like psychologist, coach. And eventually, at the end of every week, I'd be like, Stefan, you really pissed me off on this. And he'd be like, well, I think you need to say how you feel. And like, but it wasn't problematic because it was like, this is the structure in which if we want to do this in a year's time, we need to actually be able to do.
Yeah. Cool. And then can you talk about maybe the second part? So you met Stefan, and then you guys built your product in a week, and then that phase of the program ended. What does the next phase of the program look like?
So slightly more independent. So the second phase, a lot of the teams are gone.
Yeah.
So you go through your kind of IC. You raise the money in 3 months, and to raise the money, you take the money they give you. And then that 3 months is more independent, and it's just like kind of building you up to be ready to fundraise, whether you want to or not. You have the option of doing it, you have the option of not, and doing that kind of demo day whenever you want. We actually delayed it. So, you know, me and Steph at the time were like, we actually just want to raise an angel round. We are slightly behind on everyone else, but like we have like a lot more, like the digital biomarker stuff was pretty technical, and I think it just needed more work, and we weren't ready to raise the seed. So we took like another 300,000-400,000 on an angel round. But that kind of for us was kind of being like, okay, let's actually see if we can deliver something. It was just building, learning, having all their support, figuring out the legal stuff. Like it doesn't, as meant, I'm not trying to say it sounds like less exciting, but it was more like, okay, this is like actually now how a company will feel. You know, you might actually hire someone with that 80K. Like what does that look like? Then the conversations change to like, what does growth look like? What does hiring look like? What's the best practice? Like, what kind of lawyers should we go for? Like, what does tax relief look like to investors? You know, how should you construct a round? All that kind of stuff.
So it's less like networking, and it's more just like, all right, now you got to actually build your company.
Build and raise.
Yeah. But like, what is like actually raising money from EF? So it's like you mentioned, a lot of the teams kind of get cut off after that first phase because maybe they didn't find the right co-founder, maybe they didn't land on the right idea. But do they require you to jump through like other hoops to get the money once you found your co-founder idea? Or what is that?
I mean, look, they're a fund. At the end of the day, they're a fund. So like you go through the same process as you would with a VC. You know, we had LP on the call, or one of the F's advisors, or EIR. So we had 4. Like Matt was on our call. But ultimately, like our job as founders is to return investment, like return funds. Like it is. And I think they have to act like that, like as does every accelerator. So we did that, and I think it is that thing. It's like, can they prove traction? Are they building something exciting? Like they can't go off that much. Obviously, founder market fit is a huge one. That is what they should be good at. So yeah, a lot of people didn't end up even finding the right co-founder. A lot of people weren't in a place where they felt like they should keep going. And then on my cohort, I think 14 teams raised money from EF. And then others didn't raise money from EF, but then went on to raise a lot of money or got into Sequoia Arc. Like, you know, it doesn't always stop there. Like everyone's still in the startup ecosystem.
Yeah, makes sense. I think one thing that stands out to me from just looking at a lot of like accelerators is like EF's deal is pretty expensive. It's like, I think less than $100,000 US, regardless of where you are, for 10% of your company. Looking back at it, like, would you still take that EF deal?
Yeah. 100%.
Cool. And then it seems like the value prop is really like helping you find your co-founder, and then also the idea maze stuff. I think most startup accelerators sell advice. So like they sell that like their team is very smart and they're going to help you like build this company. Was that part of the value prop for you for EF when you were going through the program? And if it was, what was maybe like one piece of valuable advice that you received during the program that you thought was very memorable?
Yeah, I'd say advice, but even more so like advice from my peers. I think that was the biggest thing for me is I have come out of EF. Like most of my closest friends are people from EF, from that cohort. I see them weekly, I see them daily, I run with them every day. And I think that's been really important. That network is exceptional and super helpful. And like not competitive at all. It's like we really help. We share our investors with each other. We will hire each other's people. Like it's so close. A lot closer than like half these accelerators, people never meet each other. Or they're already in teams, so they don't have that experience of like, oh my God, do you remember when you could have been my co-founder? Like, haha. EF has amazing advisors. Like I'm still very close. I'm actually seeing them all for dinner tomorrow. I'm seeing the team for dinner. So what was really nice about EF is everyone was allocated like an EIR, like an entrepreneur in residence, like an advisor. And you got different people. So some people got like Rob Bishop, who founded Magic Pony, that was like acquired by Twitter in like 18 months. I had an amazing advisor called Zeffy, Hennessy Holland, who now is at Sequoia Arc. And that job, I think for me is like, often when you're building alone, you're not really pushed to like realize you're wrong. And like, like he just was like, actually test this more, I'm pretty sure you're wrong. Or like, this looks like shit. And I was like, thank you. Like, it's really rare to hear like someone like tell you you're wrong, or like go and explore this more, or like this is what's missing. and have real experience. Like Zephy's the founder. They were all founders, or they're all investors. And there was definitely like stuff I needed to work on. Like I remember speaking to Zephy, and he was like, Sophia, your greatest strength as the world is that like you're a seller, right? Like I can sell shit to a donkey, but I talk when I don't actually need to talk the whole time. And I remember him saying to you, he was like, you don't need to talk the whole time. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, sometimes silence is quite good. Like let them ask questions. Or like, he was like, you don't need to give away all the information at once. You don't need to bring yourself like all the time. And he was like, use it as your strengths, but also like, let Stefan talk sometimes. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. I like actually don't let Stefan talk enough. And I realized that very quickly. I was like, it's my strengths, but also like, how can I use my strengths better is to use it use it appropriately.
Makes sense. And then what advice would you give to someone applying to EF?
I definitely think like speak to people who have been through it. I look, like any accelerator or building companies are not for everyone.
Yeah.
Like, we have this illusion of Travis Kalanick, Adam, like drinking tequila in WeWorks. It's not that. Like I speak quite transparently about it. Like it's really fucking hard.
Yeah.
And I think, we all sell this vision that it's amazing and, growth at all costs. But like growth at all costs can be really problematic. And like what if you don't grow at all costs? Like I haven't. And I think it's like EF is amazing, but just like if you want to build a company, go to EF. Like that I do wholeheartedly agree with.
Yeah.
But I think like building a company in the first place is something like figure out if you actually want to do it, because it's pretty challenging. But I think with EF, speak to people who have been through it. Look at the companies that have come out before. Like EF ultimately is looking for tech companies, right? Like slightly less, I'm not saying slightly less consumer, I'm not going to speak on behalf of their fund, but like a lot of us are like deeply technical companies. So, if you want to go, build CPG, like look at CPG or like D2C, it's probably not the right place.
Yeah.
Like of all our companies, I think we were probably the most consumer driven, bar another one called AV. But if you read it and you love it, I think like go get someone who's gone through it, read through that application together.
Yeah.
Just don't LinkedIn message me, because so many people ask me to read through that applications, and I like really don't want to read anymore. I was like, EF should really pay me to read through all these applications and edit them. I think at some point they must realize that like every single word is like every single application is written by me. But I think that's it. I think it's just like talk to people. Like one of the greatest skills you can have in the world is networking. And it's like, use that network, like understand what it's going to be like. Are you ready for that pace? Like, it's very like, it's fast moving. If you don't like, you work as hard as you want, but it's like, do you actually want to work that hard?
Yeah. It's like very clear that you have like a very positive experience from EF. I guess like what is the perception from the outside community? Like people in Europe who haven't done EF, maybe they're an investor, maybe they're just an operator at another startup. Like, what do they think of EF? Do you have a general idea?
I think the reason we're probably speaking is because EF is well known, right? Like it is, right? It's in Europe. It's EF. Like Techstars too. Like I've also been through Techstars, but actually an Abu Dhabi program. So luckily we were given the money without equity, which is lovely. Very ideal. Could not give away more through EF. But I think with EF, they have a phenomenal reputation. They are clearly making good investments. They just raised a massive Series C as well. And I think investors look very fondly upon EF. Like our demo days are always great. You can see how our network kind of expands just outside of our cohorts. And that also we're all building really cool and really different shit. Yeah. And I think that's really exciting. You're not seeing like copycat companies or like the same companies over and over again. Like there are a lot of people who have gone through EF that like were the first in their space to do that. Yeah. Like Tractable is a good example. I'm like, whoa, like how did that even come about?
Yeah. I didn't know about the Techstars thing. So would you recommend EF over Techstars?
That is, I feel like I could get in trouble with either one. I think they're very different, right? Like I couldn't be where I am now without EF.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very different program, right? Like with Techstars, I had a company.
Yeah.
So they're totally different. They're like totally different programs. And Techstars was also in Abu Dhabi, which is now where I work. So I felt like EF could not do what Techstars did for me in Abu Dhabi because it's like a totally different landscape, right? And Techstars couldn't have done what EF had done. And it's the same reason, like, you'll see a lot of EF founders go through YC.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then is there, last question, because I know we're short on time here. Is there anything I didn't ask about that you think is important to know when for someone considering EF?
One thing that I think EF is good at, which a lot of early stage pre-idea accelerators don't do, is they do pay you a stipend the whole way through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important, because founding, it's a weird one, right? Because like in hindsight, it shouldn't be, but like founding is expensive because you're not making money at the beginning. You still have to live, like ideally you want to live in a city where you can network and you can meet people. You're probably actually losing money. And you don't know when you're going to get it. And that's really stressful because, like, you know, I was 24 when I went into EF. Like, it wasn't like I'd suddenly, you know, been at Blackstone for 5 years and saved some money.
Yeah.
And like, obviously I was fortunate enough that my parents lived there, but I was like actually having money and some form of safety net while I was building out something was like, took away a slight stress that actually could have really impacted my ability to build, because I'd be like, shit, when am I going to be able to like pay off my credit card? Or like, oh my God, like, can I afford to get the tube or an Uber if it's late? Whereas like, I was actually like, yes, I can leave the home.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah. Does everyone receive the stipend, or do you have to like apply for it? Or
everyone
receives it?
Part of the program. Yep. You get it the whole time.
That's really cool. Sweet. Well, yeah, those were all the questions I had for you. Thank you so much, Sophia, for joining me today. I think this conversation will be really useful to people considering EF and just accelerators in the future. Yeah, appreciate it.
Happy to do a Techstars one next whenever you need it.
Cool. Thank you. I'm